Welcome back to the things we know. Today's episode is a loaded one. It's juicy, it's uncomfortable, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately for different reasons. And we'll get into that. We're going to talk about a TV series, but really we're using it as a doorway into a much bigger conversation, one about how women are judged, how quickly blame lands, and how often that blame is just about behavior, but about morality and about who we decide someone is.
Yeah, this episode came together for me very organically because I fell in love with this show immediately. I, I watched All Her Fault, which is on Peacock. And not only did I binge it over the course of 2 days, but then I rewatched it almost immediately in shorter bursts with Darren and Charlotte because I could not stop thinking about it. I had never seen women and the way women are blamed. I had never seen this on in media before, in television, in a movie. And then I ended up having a conversation with a client because I posted about it on Facebook. So now as people are watching it, they're messaging me like, "Oh my God, you're right. Oh my God." And so again, yeah, I was talking with a client about this, and this theme came up, and we weren't even really talking about the plot so much as just the general sense of the feeling that the show left her with, how unsettling it was to watch how fast judgment landed on the women in the story, how, you know, it was melodramatic, but was that piece of it intentional because women are always told we're so dramatic about things.
Mm.
And so, yeah, just in general, I was like, okay, Carrie, I feel like this needs to be an episode mainly because it lands on so many things we talk about on a regular basis on this pod to begin with.
No, you did. And I appreciate your patience with me because it took me a bit, partly because it was over the holidays and we got sick. But even before that, it was harder for me to stream. I don't know why it took so long to figure out how to get Peacocks and to like pay.
Oh,
And then Brendan was like, "That's a stressful show. You're paying like $20 to watch a
totally.
stressful show." I'm like, I'll figure it out. I knew it was going to be heavy, and then once I watched it, it landed like right in the middle of questions I've already been asking, things you and I have been discussing here on the pod, but also offline
Sure.
and talking about with my boys. And I've been thinking a lot lately, but just about how history tells stories about women, how quickly women are morally judged differently than men. There's like that added moral, like twist to it when you look back. Like, why did that have to be the way that
Mhm.
story got told? Nothing got told about him morally. How rarely they're given the benefit of the doubt in the way men are. So this didn't feel like just watching a show. It felt like watching a cultural pattern play out. And I'm really glad you encouraged me to watch it.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me when I was talking to Tressa, who was the client I was speaking to, was she said, "Well, representation matters." And I thought that's exactly it. To see these different women archetypes, which we're going to talk about here in a second, represented in a way that I had never seen. I think that's what struck me. So, quick spoiler before we go further, we are going to talk about some major plot points. So, if you haven't watched it yet and you want to, this would be your moment to pause and then come back and listen afterwards. Because it is so twisty and turny. I wouldn't want to ruin this for anyone. So,
Mm-mm.
we'll give you a second. Okay, so now let's talk about how, on the surface, All Her Fault is a psychological thriller. A mom,
Yeah.
Marissa Irvine, who's played by Sarah Snook from Succession, she
Beautiful
goes,
setting in Chicago and Wilmette. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it was filmed in
Yeah.
Australia.
Oh,
I
I
know.
did not know that.
Well, because
I
I
just
went on
assumed
the,
that was
I
parts of
know.
Wilmette that I hadn't even had a sense of.
Because it does on some level look like Wilmette, but their house in particular, I was like, where is that house and how can I buy that? I mean, I literally, and then
Yeah.
it was like a lot of it was filmed in Australia.
Ah,
Although a lot of it wasn't. All some of the downtown stuff, obviously the Bean is in there. So there was definitely some Chicago parts, but there was a lot that I'm like, I don't recognize that. And then it was in
yeah.
Australia. And Sarah
Well,
Snook is Australian and she just had a child not too long ago. So maybe that was part of it. Anyways, Marissa goes to pick up her son Milo from a play date. And when she arrives at the address she was given, the woman that opens the door says not only does she not know her? She doesn't know Milo. She has no idea why Marissa is there. And then from there, it unfolds into a missing child mystery, essentially. But again, very quickly, the story shifts. It stops really being about what happened and starts being about who's responsible. And not just responsible in a logical sense, but again, as you were saying earlier, responsible in a moral sense.
Yeah. And I think critics have been pointing this out because I was reading a lot about it when we were preparing for this, like what critics were saying. A lot of reviews were noting that even the title reflects a cultural reflex. When something goes wrong involving a child, we don't just look for facts, we look for fault. And culturally, the fault almost always lands on women first, especially moms, especially working moms.
Yep. And the show really, it just makes it clear that this isn't about one quote unquote bad decision. It's about a system of judgment, so to speak. And it's always quote unquote poor judgment, theoretically, on the mom's part.
There's three, but honestly, we could argue four because we'll get to that. But
Hmm.
three main women who are judged relentlessly in the present moment of the story: Marissa Irvine, Jenny Kaminsky, played by Dakota Fanning, and she's another working mom who
Hmm.
who Marissa thinks the play date is with, right?
Yep.
And then Carrie Finch, Jenny's nanny. Two working moms and a caregiver. And from early on, all three are treated as suspect, all three. They're not just questioned, they're morally scrutinized about their competence and their judgment and their character.
The interesting thing is when you say they're not just questioned, the cops, as they are questioning them, stay very even keeled. The morally scrutinized around their competence and their judgment, and we're going to talk about this in a second, really comes from everyone outside of the cops, right? The cops are kind of doing a just the facts, ma'am situation. And then it's really everybody outside, which is what is so infuriating. Marissa is blamed for not double checking the play date details. Jenny's blamed for not vetting the nanny well enough. The nanny, Kari, is treated as dangerous and like kind of immediately before anyone really understands her role or her
Yeah.
history. And then again, what's important, as I just said, that this doesn't just come from law enforcement. In fact, it kind of doesn't come from law enforcement at all. Or it comes really a little bit at the media. They do a press conference and the media kind of goes at her, Marissa in particular. Comes from friends, other parents, spouses. Oh my God, the
Yeah.
spouses. And
I was gonna say to your point, the director does a really good job through the eyes of the detectives, like watching the spouses be the
yes,
most judgmental,
yep,
interesting, and just
yep,
such it's like so unaccountable.
yep.
Um, but to your point about community, I want to talk about the class mom because she becomes such an annoying and important character in the way this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I didn't think about this, but we don't even know her name. I don't think we
Mm-mm.
ever learn her name, but she's got a little posse of mean people with her because it's a man, a stay-at-home dad, and then another stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
So she's got a little posse. She's such a recognizable archetype. She's that mom who doesn't work outside the home, holds the social power in the school community. She knows the roster, she knows the schedule, she knows who belongs, and she's the one who says the judgment out loud. And even in this archetype, right? Now she's the stay-at-home mom that we are demonizing because of
Right,
she's
totally.
showing up like
She's
this
being characterized in a way that's gross too. And I've been
million
both.
percent.
And I've been both. And I can, while like the lines I'm about to share, while that archetype annoys the snot out of me, because I have actually known people like that. I also feel for them because, like, as
Totally.
coaches, we know like they're really trying to feel important in their lives. But anyway,
Right.
one of the first lines when they're trying to figure it out. And she actually has Jenny's kid. So she's like, no, Jenny doesn't have your kid because I have her kid. She's talking to the woman helping her and she's like, I have the class list. I can send it to her again. The word again
Mm.
is doing so much work. It implies incompetence and failure and positions Marissa as someone who just already dropped the ball, like in the middle of her crisis.
Yep. Oh my God. My cortisol, to your point, Brendan's exactly right. Like, we already have Peacock, so it did cost us extra money. But for you to go out and do this, thank you so much because
No.
you paid for like a really high energy, high intense
Mm,
experience. But yeah, so then there's this moment where Jenny, the other mom, she says, the class mom says to her, did you think that if someone took him and used your name, why they knew they could use your name? And I'm saying it kind of in, like she has this snotty tone in everything she says. Not once do you feel any sense from her of like sympathy. It's all like she's waiting for the next little bit of gossip or whatever. And so that's not curiosity. That is she's jumping to a conclusion. She's saying that Jenny's reputation made this possible, that they could use her because they know she's flighty and she may or may not have everything under control.
And what's true, and they're showing it from the very beginning, is Jenny is not flighty. She's
At all.
actually doing everything. She's like
Yep.
running some publishing group and she's making a really big pitch, and a lot of people depend on her. And she's clearly got a husband who's like, "What time are you going to be home? When am I done watching him?" Like, who, and
That
we're,
husband, I
oh,
wanted to punch in the
smack him.
throat. Oh my God.
And yet you can tell from the flashbacks they make of, being hit up to help with the auction or stuff like that, that like
Yeah.
Jenny is just constantly, and that's where the two women bonded. They just constantly feel judged and they constantly feel like they're not doing enough. So yeah, oof, this is how moral judgment often works, right? It's framed as concern. That's a big pet peeve of mine. I'm just
Yep.
concerned. And then everything that comes after that is like judgment. It's framed as helpfulness, as responsibility, as like the moral authority.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. And so again, both Marissa and Jenny are working moms. Marissa runs like a hedge fund or like a financial company. Jenny is
Mhm.
working on a big client for a independent, what do I want to say, book company.
Publishing, yeah.
Thank you, publishing. And again, the show is very intentional about how that plays into the blame, right? There's this concept called default parent, where even in households where both parents work, and we talked about this in Pots, Pans, and Power last season, mothers are still assumed to be responsible for anticipating, for planning, and managing everything related to their children. And we do.
We do. So when something goes wrong, the question becomes, why didn't she prevent it?
Hmm.
And that's why the scene with Jenny's husband is so painful, because he blames her in front of detectives for not vetting the nanny properly. And then we learned right away that he had nothing to do with the process at all. He didn't interview, he didn't research, he didn't participate. And like literally, that's lost on him. It's not lost on the detective, which is interesting.
That is one of my favorite scenes, no question. Little side note, ridiculousness on my end. We ran into Michael Pena, who plays that detective. So he's like one of those people. He's on our list of celebrities we've run into. So like whenever we see somebody like that, we're like, oh, he's our friend.
I
He's not our
love
friend. He
him.
did not even know we existed. But yes, he is so good in this. And so when he turns to her and goes, well, what did you find when you did the references on the
Mm-hmm.
nanny? And he was, oh, I didn't do that. That's Jenny's responsibility. I was like, oh my God. Again, I just wanted to like scream from the rooftops. This is it, people. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about pots, pans, and power.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're talking about. This Jenny is trying to land a huge client that could make a huge difference for her publishing company.
And for
And
she and her
she's,
husband, he's a middle school teacher.
God bless teachers. But
Right. But I'm just saying, like,
oh my,
he could probably use that support from her. So
a
yeah, it's
million percent. And but she's got to keep all the calendars. She's got to interview. She's da 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 da. Oh my God. I just it was so painfully familiar.
I'm gonna ask for forgiveness ahead of time if we get into this later, because we might, because I can't remember if I left it in here. But I will say, as a personal aside, it's really interesting that that detective, who they get, has the whole backstory that he has a nonverbal autistic son,
Yep.
is the one who's going, what about you? What about, like, that he has the awareness and the
Right.
sensitivity, and he is definitely in a shared parenting situation.
And I think that's the difference, right? Because he
Mm-hmm.
lives with he and his wife
In a
and their
totally different
son. It
dynamic.
was very clear that that was, yes, a shared dynamic. And
And he
so of
runs into his
course,
own moral stuff. So he's really aware of morality stuff. Anyway, I
yeah,
just think
no, no,
that's
no. You're
fascinating.
exactly right. You're exactly right. But it's interesting because in that moment we don't know that yet. In the
Mm-hmm.
movie, we don't know that yet. So we do sort of look at him like, oh, look at you paying attention to women, you know.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, this feels so painfully familiar. Whether you've had it in your own life, whether you've had it in your work life, whether you've had it with your friends, this idea that responsibility is assigned by default. and the judgment is shared freely without having all the facts. So there's research that actually helps explain this. Sociologist Alison Deminger talks about cognitive labor and breaking it into anticipating needs, identifying options, making decisions, and monitoring outcomes. The labor is largely invisible until something goes wrong. And when it does, then the blame becomes incredibly visible, and it
Mm.
always lands on the person with the vagina.
I just, because there's also another study, I think that, yeah, that really puts numbers into this dynamic. Because in 2019, sociologist, I wrote this down, Sarah Tabo, Sabina Cornrich, so sorry about your names, and Leah Rupaner. They published research where they showed people identical descriptions of messy homes. Like they showed them, they described them, and they showed pictures. Same mess, same facts. The only thing that changed was whether the home was described as belonging to a man or a woman. And what they found was that women were judged much more harshly. The mess was seen as a personal failure, even moral failure. It wasn't even seen as a mess anymore when they said it was meant in certain cases. When the same mess belonged to a man, they assumed he was busy or overwhelmed. Same environment, completely different verdict.
Wow. And again, this is exactly what this show is dramatizing. Same situation, different judgment depending on who the woman is. And then again, we sort of touched on this. Sorry, there's this motherhood penalty, right? Study after study shows that working mothers are seen as less competent and less committed, while working fathers, are often just rewarded for simply showing up, for simply being involved parents.
Oh my God. I can't even tell you how many times when my kids were really little, I think, we were flying to Orange County in LA a lot, mostly LA because my dad was in Cedars-Sinai. And luckily I had a mother-in-law who was semi-retired at that point. So she would take my littles and I would go to the hospital. When I was flying alone with, 3 little boys or 2 little boys, depending on how many I had with me at the time, people would glare at me until the flight was over. And then they would be so nice, like, oh, they were so good. But they just
Mm.
like, ooh, no one's trying to help me with a stroller or anything. And not that I needed help, but sometimes my hands were a little full with stuff. Brendan, got on a flight once with them. Didn't have a diaper, and like 3 people offered him a diaper. Like if I didn't have a diaper, I would have got such look of consternation. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it was just, and he notices it too. Like people are all over themselves to compliment me and help me. And oh, it's okay, I'll hold your baby. Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird.
It's
Is
also,
it weird or is it just straight up misogyny?
it is straight up misogyny. It also explains like why the judgment in the show feels so intense because it's not just fear about a missing child, it's fear of being exposed as the wrong kind of mother, right?
Yep.
And honestly, it's where I keep thinking about like Bad Moms. That's such a funny movie. It's a comedy, but it landed because it was true. Like Christina Applegate character was like such a personification of that mom who, wants everything to be like done just so. And there's like the standards are impossible you got to do everything. You got to do it perfectly. You got to be grateful. You got to smile. And the second you don't, you're judged. And I loved that take on it. And I loved Kristen Bell and I forget the main one who
Catherine
was in
Hahn.
it. Catherine Hahn was the best, actually. But like, who is the main one? She's married to Ashton Kutcher, and I can't
Oh
think of her
yeah.
name. Mila
Who's
Kunis.
also Mila Kunis is also in All Her Fault.
That's true.
Yeah, she plays
Oh,
the. Oh, is that right? No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a different movie. She's not in.
okay.
She's not in
I
All
was
Her
gonna
Fault.
say I don't know if
My
she
bad.
was, but
She's in another
but
movie I just
anyway,
saw.
like I to your point, I'm glad that it's been brought out in the open to laugh about because it's a good conversation. But this was a chilling, reflection of how it's still so bad.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I will. So full disclosure, I haven't seen Bad Moms, but now you saying all of this makes me want to go watch it. I think laughing at anything is always helpful and a bit of a fun relief to have women seen better. But again, All Her Fault. I think it's so I want to use the word like arresting because it hurts to watch the show. It hurts to watch how each of these women are portrayed, even so far as the nanny, right? Because again, like at the time, you don't know what's going on. You find her backstory. They do a whole episode that's just on her backstory. Because to be fair, this isn't a movie. It is a limited series. So it's 8 episodes and they do a whole episode. But again, you don't know any of this stuff. And yet we're immediately jumping to conclusions. And so again, all her
And as a
fault,
mom, I'm just out, like I'm out for her blood. Like I'm just
a,
furious with her.
a million
I'm
percent.
believing everything.
Yep. Well, which is what's so fascinating, right? Is that until you see different pieces, again, it's internalized misogyny in some ways. Instead of letting everything unfold, because this happens with a couple of different characters, we'll talk about Leah here in a second. All her fault just shows what happens when those same standards that are applied in crisis, the high standards we put on working women, stay-at-home mom, working moms, stay-at-home moms, women in general, then when a crisis happens, how damaging it can be. In art, writers, directors, actors, songwriters, they have tried to enlighten us on these patterns for decades. Art imitating life is so helpful to see. Again, representation matters. However, why does constantly seeing it not make it change?
No. Yeah. I don't want to say too much about the nanny, but that is one of the most like the most self-reflective things I had to look at after that. Because
Yep.
I already could sympathize with those two moms. I was having a harder time with like what we expect from caregivers, right? And how one-dimensional we make them, and then how easy it was to see her as a villain and assume everything that was unfolding was just proof that she's violent or something. But there was this great conversation between the two moms when they're just, trying to support each other. And what was also interesting is everyone kept telling Jenny, stay away from her. She's going to sue you.
Right.
And she was like, I just want to go support her. And like,
Yeah, and
nobody,
the sense that what Jenny was doing was had a double meaning, right? That she
right.
was doing this so not to be sued, and it was like, no, she's just
She just like was
feeling for this
drawn
other
to like be
mom.
there for her.
Yeah,
And so that was interesting. And that she was like, I have all these nightmares. Give me something to not have a nightmare about. And she said, well, one time my son hurt his finger and Kari made a finger puppet. So your son's with someone who makes finger puppets. You know what I mean? Like there was this like soothing moment, like
yeah,
mom to mom to mom.
right.
Like there is a nurturing person involved here. That's controversial and interesting. Anyway, I want to
Well,
get
and
to Leah. Oh, okay,
before we
yeah.
get into Leah, though, there's even a piece, and again, Tressa pointed this out to me. Even the woman who opens the door that where Marissa thinks that's her kid. Again, hopefully, I don't think we're releasing too much information, but this is kind of a plot point. That woman, it turns out, has a connection to the entire scenario that's happening. And the reason the kid is sent to Marissa, to this woman, is brought up again. Like, okay, at least think about the guy that sent you to that woman's house knew that that woman was the nicest person he'd ever had in his life. And so Tressa pointed out, even the other characters are put upon, like responsibility is put on that woman's shoulder, the woman who opened the door. It, she was just living her life. And now she's drawn into this situation. And so it's like none of the women escape the responsibility, the judgment. And so I guess that's a good lead into Leah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm so glad you didn't forget that part. Okay, so Leah is the aunt of the missing child, played by one of our favorite actors. And okay, all of a sudden I'm blanking on Abby's last name.
Abby Elliott.
Elliott, thank you.
Yeah.
So Leah is she's the aunt. So she's the sister of Peter Irvine, Marissa's husband.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of reasons we haven't gone into him and we may not, but that's because that would give a lot away.
Yeah.
Anyway, Leah, her storyline adds a whole other layer that I want to get into.
Yeah, she represents what happens when blame doesn't just land once, but becomes an identity. She grew up believing she was responsible for her brother Brian's disability. So there's Peter, there's Leah, and there's Brian. And this belief shaped her entire life. She is treated as unstable, she's treated as messy, she's treated as someone whose reactions can't be trusted, her instincts can't be trusted. And then that blame is never fully examined or undone.
No, and what's devastating is that it's propped up and, enabled by Peter. because he needs to be the hero. He needs to be the fixer. He admits that early on in this crisis. Like, oh, he looks at his brother and sister, and says like, I still need you guys to need me. That's what's going to keep me sane through all this. I need to like, I need to keep you calm, and I need to like keep solving your problems. So the show
So it's
isn't
all
just
about
examining,
him.
right,
Mhm.
just examining women who are blamed in the present. It's also showing us a woman who was blamed in the past and never released from it, a woman whose entire identity was shaped by carrying guilt for something that she may not have done.
Right.
So that an adjacent man could maintain his hero narrative. That's really, really key here. And it isn't always like sometimes it's a like a mother to daughter thing. It isn't always like man to woman that this is caused, but it is so much easier to heap. And I can see scenarios where a man would grow up with similar blame and guilt, believing things about themselves. It's just that in this concept, in the context of this show, how interesting that every female character, even that sweet woman who opens the door, like there's like a moment of like, well, what's wrong? Are you responsible for someone who might be responsible for this? Right. So like
Totally.
every single female character is under scrutiny.
Yep. Leah is literally the personification of the afterlife of blame. And that story that sort of calcifies in your bones that she can't escape because even she second guesses herself. She's again what happens when moral judgment calcifies. And then when you zoom out, you realize that this pattern didn't just start with Milo disappearing. Women have long been evaluated, again, not just on their actions, but on their character, on domestic competence, on moral worth. Men get complexity, women just get verdicts.
Mm,
Hmm.
yep. And that's why stories like this hit such a nerve, because we don't just watch women, we assess them. We decide what they deserve. I mean, patriarchy just does this. It pits women against women. You feel like a better woman if you're not some of these women, right? So if you found
Yep.
yourself judging these women while you watched, that doesn't make you a bad person. It means you're living inside a culture that taught us these reflexes. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. You're right. You said it earlier, but like we all jump to these conclusions. Um, from the get-go,
Mm.
until the bits of the story unfold, until you start to see the way they've been set up, they being the women, you're right along there with the community, the husbands, the class mom kind of like, why didn't you? And then it's like, oh shit, oh shit. So it is this watching this is like an invitation to not feel shameful if you feel that, but to be aware of how and catching yourself. I feel like this can be one of those experiences where you can't unknow now what you know.
Right.
I feel like ever since I've watched it, not only have I been more aware of how this shows up in life, whether it's my life or my friend's life, um, but just it, I just will be very I will take a beat before I start to make assumptions again.
I mean, we've exhausted the topics. I shouldn't say exhausted because it makes me sound sick of it. I'm not. I'm always very ready to talk about it. But the just uneven scrutiny, and permit me for a little bit of a tangent here, but my kids currently, while we're recording this, are traveling in Argentina, and it got me thinking of how I was obsessed with Ava Peron because my parents went and saw Vita and played the soundtrack. So I was like, "What's this about?" And even then, I was aware there was like moral scrutiny of her. It wasn't just that she was a popular feminist leader. They had to like reduce her to everything got reduced to sexuality and ambition. It wasn't just like whether for the things she was guilty of, but for the things she was also beloved for, it wasn't ever just about like the job they were doing. So many women in history, they either get reduced to like a flatline sort of character. Mary Magdalene, what do we know about her? She's a
Oh yeah.
prostitute. But
Yep.
like history would show so much more complexity to her wisdom and her support, right? And the role she played. I like Joan of Arc, like, oh, she's crazy, she's a heretic, but like, there was also bravery, and there was a lot of complexities about things that happened to her. And then even two controversial people who I will mention because they're not guilty.
Right.
Both Martha Stewart and Ghislaine Maxwell, very different types of crimes, very guilty, but for some reason they got extra extra annihilated but for their like moral character than men
Right.
do for the same crimes. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell's the only one in prison for all the stuff happening with the Epstein years. And so I'm not saying they didn't deserve to be punished. They both did. They both committed crimes. But like, why is it that we know so much more and we come at them with so many different angles? That's a fascinating thing. It's not a sympathetic example, but it is an example. And then like I mean, like we looked at so much during the campaign.
Yep.
Nobody looks at male characters and knows that it's going to be effective to say he slept his way to the top the way they would with a woman.
I just saw today AOC pushing back on a Fox. Did you see this?
Yeah.
A Fox News producer said that Jesse Waters wanted AOC to be on his show, and she was like, he has sexualized me. He has, you know, said all these horrible things about me. And the producer's like, that's not true. She's like, he said that I slept my way to the top. Explain to me how that is not inappropriate. And then just walks away. Mic drop.
It
But
was
that's
so
just it.
good.
I mean, how many
We
women,
can't just like talk on the merits equal to equal.
a
We have
million
to like
percent.
add a moral flaw that's going to completely like defame and completely obliterate everything else they've accomplished.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
know this
it's
is a tangent, but it does apply here because we weren't just looking at two scared parents. We were looking at one that was more responsible for some reason.
right. Right. Yeah. I cannot. We've talked about sort of the socio-political aspect of this movie, or this limited series on Peacock, and we are not getting any money for promoting this. I might add, that'd be lovely to have some Peacock money, but we aren't.
Yeah.
But above and beyond this, it is a really like I had a friend, my friend Laurie, texted me the other day and goes, "Oh my God, it was so twisty and turny, and like it wraps in on itself a million ways. It is intense." But ultimately it is enjoyable and I will say satisfying as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, what struck me and the reason I wanted to talk about it was I had never seen the way fault is placed on any given woman in any situation. I had never seen it represented this way on in any kind of media before, and that's why I felt like it was important. And then it is also a really interesting. And I will say this, I as I said, I posted about it almost immediately when I watched it, and I had so many people coming in and being like, "Oh my God, I loved it, I loved it." I had one person I knew be like, "Oh, it's too melodramatic. This isn't even real life." And I found that fascinating. It was a obviously it was a woman, not obviously, but it was a woman who said that. But I would say 90, everybody but her has reflected back to me like, holy shit, that movie was unbelievable. So,
That was I almost always can predict. I can always pick up on what's going to happen. I did not see that coming.
I was not sure. Well, it is one of those classic mysteries where there's a lot of red herrings, right? Yeah, that's all I'll say. There's a lot of red herrings. Um, and so you're constantly thinking, oh, nope, that's the one I did. Oh, nope, that's whose fault it is, you know. But in the end, yeah,
You're
it's
right. That started to feel formulaic, and so that well done on them to make you think that you could follow a thread.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You cannot. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we did pick a song for today. I picked Lily Allen's "Sleepwalking." There's not a lot to quote in this because this is one of her new songs. She played it on SNL, and but if you know Lily Allen's current story, right? Like she and her husband David Harbour, who is in Stranger Things, have broke up last year over cheating and so forth. And I think again, this is interesting because he, as I read it, as I understand it, asked for an open marriage. She kind of agreed, thinking, well, okay, this is how we're going to stay together. But again, you know, the nobody's talking about David Harbour. You know, they're focusing on Lily. Anyways, so the song's called Sleepwalking, and the lyrics are, and I don't know if you do it intentionally, but somehow you make it my fault. You don't stop talking, and I'm just sleepwalking. And again, once you watch the entire show, I think You Don't Stop Talking and I'm Just Sleepwalking feels very much like what Marissa goes through because there's
Yeah.
so much of Marissa, the mom who's the mom of Miles, who she is. She's just trying to get from one day to the next and figure out how can she do everything she can do to get Milo home. And fucking Peter just yappity yap yap yapping all the goddamn time.
And just deciding for her. Yeah.
Yep,
Oof.
deciding for her. Oh my God, so much deciding for her.
That
So,
drove me nuts.
yes,
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for listening. If this episode struck a chord for you, sparked something for you, share it with someone you'd love to have a juicy conversation about this topic with, or you can maybe do a watch party with.
love that. Yeah,
We'd
and
love
if
to
you,
hear.
I would love to hear what you guys thought of All Her Fault. So on any of our posts, if you want to chime in or you want to DM us or reach out to us over the Things We Know podcast 23 at Gmail. Um, again, it's I'm gonna insert a commercial for the retreat here because I think it just hit me what we always talk about, which was Melissa's original reflection after coming to the very first retreat in Laguna, is one of the things that's so fun about the Best Chapter Yet retreats is when the women come, they get to leave their outdoor life, their outside life outside. All the
Mhm.
blame, all the fault, all the guilt, all the shame that's either been heaped on them or that they have took in
Self-imposed.
is
Yeah.
self-imposed. They get to leave that all away on the outside, and I think it's one of the reasons that there is such a transformation in such a short amount of time because they don't have to think about that shit while they're with us. We really try to close that container, keep that container of the weekend just for them. So the next retreat is at the end of February. We still have a couple of spaces left. It's in Palm Springs. It's going to be glorious. But aside from that, make sure to, as Carrie said, share, but really come back next week for another episode and be sure to follow this podcast, heart it, give it stars, give it a review wherever you are. And we appreciate it. Thanks,
We really
everyone.
appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.